Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us tonight for our professional development series this year with the focus of finance this year, or for this evening, sorry. So we're very excited to have some wonderful panelists and speakers with us this evening to share some wisdom and insights with you all this evening. So again, thank you all for joining. You are welcome to have your videos on if you like. If you would like to turn them off, that is perfectly fine as well, but it is completely up to you all. So my name is Randy Tripp Jr. I serve on the Ron Brown team as Director of Scholarship and Alumni Services, and want to thank my colleagues Anita Karadia and Holly Duke for helping to organize tonight. And I am going to get out of the way and really let you all learn from the experts who are in the virtual space tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to our moderator for the night, Devin Cash. He is a Ron Brown Scholar, class of 2014, and is currently an investment banking associate with Goldman Sachs. So I will turn the floor over to you, Devin, to take things over.
Cool, thank you. Appreciate it, Randy, and happy to be here with you all and moderate this panel. As Randy mentioned, I'm RBS class of 2014. I also graduated from Stanford in 2018, so I'm not one of the experts. I'm just moderating the panel. But we are joined by some folks currently in the industry. Jillian Alzheimer, who is a VP in the investment banking division at Goldman Sachs. Nitya Mani, who's a trader at Jane Street Capital, and Salil Fatness, who's an equity research analyst at Dodge & Cox. And we'll sort of walk through sort of their career progression and try and demystify some things about the industry along the way. So with that said, how about we just open up and maybe starting with Jillian, how about you just tell us about, your journey, to where you are now, where you started, what was sort of the pathway that you took to get to your finance seat, and we can go through the rest of the panelists.
Sure, and apologies in advance. I think it just started thundering here in New York, so I've been hearing some things and I don't know what else it could be. So if you hear thunder, it's from outside. So I am a senior VP in the investment banking division at Goldman. I actually started my career, I graduated undergrad with a business major in 2008. I then went to Morgan Stanley for 2 years and was an investment banking analyst at Morgan Stanley in the media and tech group. I thought being an analyst was a really difficult position to be in. You're working really hard and you're learning a lot. And graduating in 2008 was obviously a tricky year, kind of like graduating and starting during COVID, but probably worse because in 2008, people were actually being laid off and as the financial crisis was happening. So it was a really difficult time and difficult, start to finance. Because of that experience, I actually ended up going to law school. So I went to Columbia Law School. And then I worked as a corporate associate at a big New York law firm, Wachtell Lipton, doing mergers and acquisitions, doing securities, doing IPOs. And I really realized over the course of my both law school and legal experience that I love doing deals. I enjoy working on things that are on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or the Times. I think it's really interesting. So I moved back to finance about 1.5 years ago. And I am at Goldman now doing activism and shareholder advisory, which kind of is like a mix between law and finance. We do activism, and we do it from the defense side. So we think about when a hedge fund wants to take a run at a company and maybe change the board or maybe tell the company what they should be doing and tells the company why the hedge fund knows best. And we work with the companies to help defend them. So we help them think through their strategy. We help them think through, do they have a sum of the parts discount? Is there some other type of strategic or financial issue that the company should be thinking about proactively? So we think about companies and how they're structured, and then we help basically defend them from hedge funds.
Thanks, Nitya.
Yeah, so it's great to meet all of you. My name is Nitya, and I'm currently a quantitative trader at Jane Street, which is a quantitative market making firm. So when I was in college, I did not know really what a stock was, did not really know what a bond was at all. even in my own personal finance life. I kind of studied math and computer science in college and went into college really excited about exploring the hardest math problems I could find. Eventually, I found my way to Jane Street to do an internship, not really expecting it to be the kind of thing I spent more than one summer thinking about. And I absolutely loved it. I learned so much over that summer, and I found all kinds of really exciting and interesting math and computer science problems that are present in the finance industry that I was just really, really interested in working more on and spending more time on. So ultimately, I graduated from Stanford. I got my bachelor's in math and a master's in computer science. I did spend some time working at a tech startup doing natural language processing, which was pretty far from, I think, the kind of thing I realized I wanted to spend a career working on. And I joined Jane Street as a quantitative trader. So maybe I guess one peculiar thing about Jane Street is that we don't have titles. So my boss and his boss and the people I mentor and manage all have the same title as me. And that's kind of a part of the structure at the firm, where what we do as quantitative traders is we spend our time split between three things. The first is trading, which is ironically enough only one of the things, but that's kind of monitoring automated and semi-automated trading systems, manually executing trades on a day-to-day basis, on a minute-by-minute basis, and thinking about markets. The second is doing quantitative research. So Jane Street is primarily a quantitative trading firm, which means that we approach kind of financial markets and we approach thinking about the kinds of problems and trades we think about from a kind of math and computer science first perspective, as opposed to kind of more longer horizon understanding kind of, you know, over like an 8-month or 2-year or 3 years timeline, what the fundamental economics of a company are. And so we spend a lot of time doing quantitative and statistical and machine learning research. I personally spend about like 50 or 60% of my time doing that every day, in addition to collaborating and mentoring younger traders and researchers on their, you know, new and exciting research projects. And the last thing is kind of writing code, either to support trading infrastructure or to write code that's part of automated or semi-automated trading systems, because the firm kind of exists on a spectrum where we do things from fully automated trading to fully manual, you know, calling up someone on the phone trading and everything in between. And traders kind of select into whatever kind of excites them the most, and that can change over time. And similarly, organically might, you know, grow in the kinds of responsibilities that they have. Right, when I first started, I was mostly working under my boss, who didn't actually know that he was my boss at that time, but we found out later. And I moved over time to kind of working on little pieces of trades, then taking over a part of a trade, then developing research ideas and trades from scratch. And now I kind of am one of the people who's running a pretty big group of trading that just kind of started with some research ideas I had that I just had the freedom to explore. So it all happened very organically, and that's the kind of thing that tends to happen at the firm.
Maybe I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Salil. Really nice to meet you all. I work at Dodge & Cox, and we are a mutual fund that's based in San Francisco. My journey and what we do at Dodge & Cox is we are sort of global value investors, where we're trying to find interesting businesses that we think will be very profitable to own over time. And my journey to Dodge & Cox really lines up with what the company did. Growing up in India and Oman, I was really fascinated to see that certain companies and people did very well financially, and I was curious that what it took for them to be that successful over time. And that really drew me to the field of investing. I spent a couple of years doing investment banking, quite like Jillian, right out of college, and really used that as a path to find a role in the investing world. And what I sort of started out as an associate at Dodge & Cox, and now I'm an analyst covering real estate and oil and gas. And what I do every day is I try to learn about the different companies in my industry, and then try to think about that if I had to own 1 or 2 stocks, you know, make a lot of money over time, what would those stocks be? And so that's really what I do.
Thank you all. That's very helpful. I think one of the things that I think I can take away right away is that finance is pretty broad, and the careers that you described are all very different. I think maybe to summarize it for the students who may not be as familiar, it seems like there is an advisory side of finance that the investment banks handle, and that would be the function that Jillian sits in. And then there's more of a asset management trading platform that Nithya sits in. And then there's sort of an equity research platform where public stakeholders can get a sense of sort of how to think about everything from stocks, equities, commodities, currencies, et cetera. And so that's sort of seems to be sort of a breakdown. Is that about right? How do you think about sort of the function that you sit in broadly as it relates to the economy broadly, as it relates to the industry broadly? Is that about right?
I mean, I can take it. The way I think about our job, as an investment banker, we are really in a client service business. So our clients are companies, public companies, or companies that are going to become public. And we think about how we can best help them navigate capital markets, help them navigate business decisions that they're going to make, and help them just think through, their future as a company and how they're going to grow or develop. So we are much more in an advisory side for companies as opposed to any of the other vectors within the industry.
Yeah, I can say a little bit about Jane Street. At least when I was in college, someone told me that Jane Street was a market making firm, and those words meant absolutely nothing to me. So Jane Street is a market making firm. And what that means, I think a good analogy to think about it is like Jane Street is a little bit like a grocery store. So if you want to pick up apples, right? How do you usually buy apples? You go to a grocery store and you pick up apples. You do not usually drive to an apple farm and buy apples directly from the farmer. Now, this is a little bit of a misleading analogy, but kind of in markets, it's very similar, right? When you want to buy a share of Apple US equity, right, on your Robinhood app, it is not necessarily the case that at the exact moment in time you wanted to buy a share of Apple US equity, there is someone else in the world who wants to sell you a share at the price that you're willing to pay of that stock. What usually happens is that there are firms like Jane Street, which are market making firms, who are just firms that are willing to kind of buy and sell most securities all day, and try and keep prices fair and in line, especially for related assets. And this can happen on short time scales and long time scales. But mostly what we're doing is we're connecting buyers and sellers across geography and across time. Yeah.
That's very helpful. And sort of to demystify sort of finance for those entering it, I think my initial impression, as maybe some of the students here, is that finance is like Wolf of Wall Street and finance is just banking. And so if you could tell us a little bit sort of about what were your expectations going into the career and perhaps even your current role, and how did that stack up to sort of any sort of initial misconceptions or misunderstandings when you, I guess, first started in your journeys?
I can, I guess, take that. Or maybe I can start taking that. Look, I think you're right. Finance does have some very interesting connotations and some stereotypes that exist. And I think what I found is in whatever walk of life or whatever industry one works in, there will always be sort of extreme examples of people who are, colorful, maybe for lack of a better term. And often those are the people that they make movies about. But my impression from finance is it's actually a lot of interesting, intelligent, hardworking, ambitious people who are very intrigued by the world of business and economics and are, trying to be a part of whether it is one company buying another company, whether it's helping people save for retirement, whether it's helping markets function efficiently. And I think it can be a very sort of rewarding career. And yes, you will run into some colorful people along the way, but in my experience, I've met, and people do work quite hard, and there are certainly parts of finance where those working hours are far more challenging than others. But generally, it's a bunch of interesting, thoughtful people who are doing fairly interesting things.
Yeah, I think that there is, I think that one common misconception in finance is that in or about financial markets in general is that there are winners and losers. And I think this is the way like movies like to portray things, like someone did a good trade and made a bunch of money off of someone else. But I think that the reality is almost every trade in the world is a win-win. When you go to like Starbucks or something and you buy a cup of coffee, like you're probably really happy that you got to like, you didn't have to do the work, you didn't have to own a coffee machine, you got to like buy the cup of coffee exactly how you wanted and pay $3 or whatever. And the Starbucks feels great. They're like, well, this cup of coffee only cost me 10 cents to make. And I think that that's also true in markets in general, which is that most trades that happen in the world, whether it's kind of IPOs, whether it's, kind of owning a mutual fund in my personal retirement account or trades on a daily basis, most of them are win-win, where both the buyer and seller are happy, because if they weren't, the trade would probably not happen. So I think that's a common misconception that leads people to kind of maybe feel that finance is kind of out to get you. In terms of working life, I think I had the impression that, all of finance, which as Devin was saying is, kind of actually a really broad area, had kind of really, really long 7 days a week working hours. And that was something that I didn't think would be well aligned to my personality and interests. Whereas in my job, I work like, I guess, now that I'm working from California, the times are not ideal, but I work like 4:30 and I'm usually done by 2:30. And, except on very rare occasions like April of last year, I don't work on the weekends. I don't really work late at night. It's very rare. Before COVID, I didn't even have access to email or any work-related anything outside of the office. So I think that was a really strong misconception I had going in.
When you're in the client service part of finance, the way I am and the way I was when I was a lawyer, you are at the whim of your client to some degree. But at the same time, you realize that yes, you're on call a lot of the time, but especially when you're early in your career, you're really building a set of skills that are marketable so you can go out and maybe find something else that is more consistent with your work philosophy or more consistent with your long-term goals. So yes, client service, investment banking can have longer hours, and that's not a misconception. That's just part of the way, the demands of the job. But there's pluses and minuses to all different types of things. So from my perspective, there's always been enough pluses in this type of work that outweigh some of the demands of my time.
Well, that's very helpful. And maybe on that point about sort of, as Salil mentioned, sort of the times you need to work hard, and Jillian mentioned sort of the work-life balance. Generally, how do you all think about work-life balance in your roles? What does it look like? How do you find time to do things for yourself or outside of work? So maybe we start with Salil on that.
Look, I think with me, I'm a little bit more in sort of Nitya's camp, where maybe I start work around 7 in the morning, and I'm usually done by 5 or 5:30, and I do a little bit of work on the weekends. We're talking like 2, 3, 4 hours on the weekend. As sort of we progress through our careers and even in life, there will be more and more demands on one's time. And I think one of the key things I try to do is I try to distinguish things that are urgent versus important. And I try to make sure I'm spending enough of my time on some of those things that I view as important. And then sort of, try to get to sort of the urgent things as well, but not focus as much on sort of urgent things that are maybe not as important. And so I think personally, one of the things that I have found is that there will be many requests placed on you. And look, this is not something you can maybe manage as much in the first 2, 3 years of your career, but over time, what I've found effective is really understanding if something needs to be done and if something needs to be like a 5-hour project versus a 5-minute phone call. And those are things that help me manage sort of the work-life balance. But again, as with sort of any sort of demand with any professional roles, I go through times that are far busier and require longer hours. The way I think about work-life balance is over 3 months or over 6 months, I want to make sure I'm getting enough time with family and things like that. But recognizing there are sort of ebbs and flows of how work happens too.
I'm happy to talk about that next, Devin.
Yeah, I'm interested in your perspective.
So Devin knows that I have 2 young kids, and I wear my mom label on my sleeve because I want people to know that it's possible to have 2 toddlers. Mine are 4 and 2.5, and still work a really demanding, very client-facing, very much on-demand job. But I think Salil's right. It's about the overall balance. It's not about the balance on any one day, because there's many weekends where I'm working the majority of the weekend. But at the same time, if I wait 2 or 3 weeks, then I might not be working at all that weekend. Or I'm working full days and long nights sometimes, but then a couple days later, I actually can be done working at 2 p.m. Or this afternoon, I had to take my daughter dress shopping because she's graduating from, being 2, I don't know, like a 2's program graduation tomorrow. So it's about the overall balance and not an individual balance. And I do strongly agree that when you're starting out in your career, you should be lean into the work. You should really devote the time when you have the time, because there's more demands on your time as you progress in your career. So I think work-life balance is possible, and it's possible to be a great parent and to be a great employee and to still take great strides in your career. And knock on wood that we're all going to take great strides in our careers.
Yeah, like I said, I think the work that I do is pretty different from, I guess, in a lot of aspects, the work that someone like Jillian does. So I've always had, very separated work and life balance hours. I think something that's generally true, though, is that the quality of the work that you do matters, and in some cases does outweigh the quantity. So I feel this temptation sometimes. There's a temptation to work 5 extra hours to get something done and get 2 hours of sleep, and then you're exhausted the next day and you're completely unproductive. And I think that part of work-life balance is like a saying, but it's also just making sure that you're able to do high quality work when you're at work. And part of that involves taking breaks, involves taking time, involves doing the things that build up your energy stores and make you excited. Yeah, I guess.
And then just pivoting just a bit to maybe discussing background. Nithya, you mentioned that you were math, computer science, and so maybe can you all speak generally about sort of finance is broad, but as people think about where they want to go into finance, is there any sort of one degree that best positions them, or what's your thought about the prerequisite skills needed to, kind of start strong in whatever finance role that you sit in? So Nithya, maybe we start with your background there.
Cool, yeah, so like I said, I did not know anything, less than the average person. I was a shockingly financially illiterate person, going into college. And I knew nothing about personal finance or about finance in general. I just knew that I was excited about math and computer science. Now, I think this is not true for all finance firms. I'm really not speaking on behalf of all of them, but Jane Street is a quantitative trading company. And that means that the skills and what we care about are your quantitative problem solving skills. We expect people to have a deep understanding of probability, but not really any other specific things that people need to or don't need to know. And we're prepared to teach people all the finance that they need and everything about markets that they need along the way, no matter what they choose to major in. So people have math majors, economics, computer science, physics, lots of other things. Those are some of the more common ones. But kind of in terms of that background, my background was just in doing a lot of math and doing math research very seriously. The specific research topics I do not use at work.
And so from that, I guess, from you all's perspective, when you're working with someone who is more junior, what are the traits that make a great sort of analyst or a great junior associate from your perspective? Maybe we start with Salil.
Sure. So, I think there are 2 or 3 things that really come to mind. I do think to do well, I agree with Nithya that what major you did in college really doesn't matter. And we've hired people from many different majors, and they've done incredibly well at Dodge & Cox and sort of at other firms I've worked at as well. The things that matter is, I do think in finance, you need a certain degree of quantitative aptitude. In many parts of finance, you're not doing particularly complex math, but you do need to have some familiarity with numbers. Perhaps the most important thing you need to have is you need to really care about your work product. Whether you're working at an investing firm, in our case, you're making investments that are in the hundreds and maybe in the billions of dollars, or you're working at an advisory firm where you're, advising on transactions that are, again, very, very big sums of money. You have to realize that your work matters and you're doing these really impactful things, and you have to sort of take some pride in the quality of your work and have some sort of drive to get numbers right and be absolutely, accurate in some of the models that you put together and things like that. The second thing I think is really valuable as a skill at the junior level is you have to have a drive to figure things out. A lot of people, in many college settings, you're told what to do and there are very specific assignments laid out. The professional world doesn't really work like that. You're given somewhat of an ambiguous problem, and then you need to go have the drive to go figure out what are the resources I can bring to solve this, and how can I sort of figure this out for the team. And maybe the third thing that I think is really valuable for someone in a junior role is you have to ask yourself that, say I'm working for Devin on this project, what are Devin's key pain points? How can I make Devin's life easier? And the more times you find yourself asking how you can make sort of your bosses or supervisors' life easier, really can help differentiate you from other peers.
Jillian, you have a perspective here?
But what makes a really good,
Yeah.
entry-level junior person on the team? I think
Or maybe let's make it direct. What do you think about me, Jillian? How does it work now, I'm joking.
Honestly, Devin, you're great. There's no problems there. But I think if I think about you, I think about, what are the really good traits? So it's a few things. One is an eagerness to learn. I 100% agree. You just have to be really interested in getting more knowledge. You don't have to love the subject matter, but you have to be eager. And that goes with the second most important trait, which is a positive attitude. What we're doing, we're working really long hours. And when we're in the office, we're around the people we're working with a lot. Or if you're like me, you're traveling with the people you're working with a lot. And you just have to have a really positive attitude that isn't going to pull down the energy and the mood of the other people you're working with, because investment banking really it's a team job. We're working with each other. We're trying to progress our clients' goals together. So the combination of an eagerness to learn and positive attitude really win the day. And then when I think back of my own career and mistakes I made when I was just starting out, I like to say that I think the third most important thing is that people should really have an attitude of saying yes to things. You shouldn't say no. You should focus on the yes. You should focus on how can I achieve this and how can I do this? It shouldn't be no, I'm too busy. No, I'm tired. No, I'm this. Because that kind of goes to this positive attitude. If you're saying no to all the things, you likely don't have a great attitude. So this culture of yes, I think, is really important, along with the positive attitude and the eagerness to learn.
And Nitya, this may be a misconception that I have probably about the work you do, but when I think quantitative, I think that you're only, you're good if, you can do X, Y, Z from the analytical standpoint, but maybe it would be helpful a little bit to maybe demystify and kind of shed light on sort of the soft skills and sort of what makes a team player, especially in sort of the work that you do.
Yeah, so I think that it's really important to have good quantitative problem-solving skills, but it is not important to have any particular skill. It doesn't matter if you know how to code or not. It doesn't matter if you know how to use Python or not. It doesn't matter if you know how to use Excel or not. But actually, I think most important is we trade on desks. So I'm on the international ETF desk, and it is an incredibly, incredibly collaborative environment. When we're trading, when I'm trading on an international ETF desk, people are constantly communicating with each other. Like all day, I'm on a continuous audio call with people, and we're constantly communicating back and forth, which is the nature of a trader. So having strong communication skills is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And I think it's particularly valuable in two ways. The first is being willing to speak up and speak up quickly, even if you're new, if you see something concerning or, you see something that could be important. And the second is having a good understanding of what are the important problems and what are the approaches. And if you can listen to other people and you can bring those up in proportion to their importance, right? I think like we always like to say like loudness in proportion to importance, right? And so having that, kind of moment to moment communication is really important. But on the research side, I do over half of my work with groups on other desks. And so being able to engage in large scale collaborations, following up with other people, making sure to understand what different people's skill sets are is incredibly valuable, because especially at a quantitative firm, different people will have different quantitative skills. So being able to, work with a group of people that don't all have the same skills as you and make quick, productive progress is extremely important. Yeah, I think that that's one of, today I was just in a meeting where, we were discussing how important being a good communicator is on the team. So.
No, thanks. This is a very helpful perspective. And as students think about sort of recruiting as, we head into the summer, what does the sort of networking recruiting process look like in your respective roles? How should students be preparing here and now for internships, et cetera? Maybe Jillian, we start with you. I know banking tends to have a very formal process, but any tips you can provide on the networking and kind of initiating in the process?
Yeah, banking is very formal. So in order to get in, if you want to go to investment bank and be an analyst in a bank, you should go through the formal process. If you're outside of the process, it's incredibly difficult to navigate a way in, especially at the entry level position. So the analyst and the associate right post MBA. So I would really recommend you focus on figuring out when your career office has scheduled meetings with the banks and going through the formal processes, putting your resume in the book and going through it that way. If you're looking for just more information in terms of learning more about what investment bankers do and how they think about, younger people on their teams, you should feel comfortable reaching out to people, especially on LinkedIn, just to have informational interviews. I wouldn't expect to hear back from everyone. I personally just don't respond to people I don't know, but I know that a lot of people that I'm close to do respond to young, students that reach out to them on social media. Similarly, sometimes we'll receive emails from students who are interested in coming to investment banking. I tend not to respond directly. I'll forward the email along to HR or HCM and have them respond, and so the person can get brought into the standard process. But some people on my team will respond off cycle and are happy to have informal interviews. Obviously, anyone on this call I'm happy to chat with, to the extent they'd like to learn more about what we do and how investment banking works.
Yeah, so at Jane Street, we accept applications. So we do the overwhelming majority, or that's maybe a strong, we do the very large majority of our hiring for our traders and our software developers, much more so for our traders, from our internship program. So we have an extremely large internship program relative to the size of firm we are. And applications for the trading internship are open approximately year round. And you can apply online and someone will get back to you pretty soon. And you'll have a series of quantitative phone interviews where people will ask you to solve questions that require understanding probability and kind of numeracy and kind of general problem solving skills. You'll have like 2 to 4 of those, and then we'll bring people either virtually or non-virtually on site for a day or 2 of interviewing after that. The process is pretty similar to apply for full-time roles as well.
I think maybe with Dodge & Cox, for anyone on this call, you should certainly reach out, and either I'll have an information conversation with you or I'll connect you with someone on my team who can have sort of that conversation. And then to maybe Devin's question of how does one prepare for the interview process, I think, the fact that you're expressing interest in Dodge & Cox and sort of an investing career, it probably behooves you to spend a little bit of time understanding what an investor does and have some familiarity with financial statements and the like. But beyond that, or make at least some reasonable effort. I recognize not everyone will have sort of done classes on financial statements or accounting, but maybe do a baseline of work that just demonstrates a little bit of interest in the field. And then the way it works is we typically have conversations with people, and where we think there's a good fit, we make job offers.
No, that's incredibly helpful. We're actually at the time in the session where we're going to transition into the various breakout rooms, so you can ask very specific directed questions. Recognize we have a lot of sub-industries and verticals represented. So I'll hand it over to Randy, who will coordinate us in the next phase of the panel.
Awesome, thanks, Devin. So I have placed you all in breakout rooms to try to make it as even as possible. So we have a few scholars and captains in each one of our speakers' rooms. So what we will do is I'm sure you're all very familiar with Zoom by now, so you'll see a little message pop up to join the breakout rooms. Just click that button, and then we'll be in the rooms for about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll come back to the main room, kind of do a quick wrap up, kind of one final question to the group, and then we will wrap up for the evening. So once you see the little button pop up, feel free to go ahead and join the rooms.
Oh, here they come.
Awesome.
Randy, I'm going to shove off here in about 4 minutes because I have an 8 o'clock meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had some good conversations in your individual breakout rooms this evening. To wrap up, I'm going to ask one final question of the panelists, if you will give me that, if you will allow me to do so. You may have mentioned this in your breakout rooms as well, but if you had to offer, again, one piece of advice or one final tidbit that you'd share with this group before we kind of close out for the evening, I'd love for each of you to kind of share kind of one piece of one tidbit or one piece of advice that you'd like to share with our students tonight to wrap us up. Is anyone?
Sure, I'll share. I'll share the advice that I tell myself every single day. It's the advice that my dad actually told me growing up, so I just try to keep repeating it. You should be the person that arrives early and leaves the latest, because you want to show that you have a really strong work ethic in everything that you do. And that's what I tell myself every day, and that's how I try to do my job every single day. And I think that applies to everyone at every stage of their career. Even though our jobs are different, and even though we have different pushes and pulls, being the first one to come and the last one to leave, and having that mentality, even though you might not be perfect at achieving it, is what my goal is. So I hope that also can be your goal in life.
I guess maybe I could go next. Look, I think, from what I've gotten to know of Ron Brown over the last year or so, I know that sort of people who are in the Ron Brown Scholars Program and sort of GPS and other things are really driven, hardworking, and sort of, I guess, slightly cliche term, but, you're really special in many ways. My only advice, maybe one piece of advice I'd like to share with you is that, despite all these positive characteristics, qualities that all of you have, careers in life have ups and downs, and I think it's really, long-term success will really depend on just hanging in there through some of the downs and some of the tough times. And so I'd really encourage you to do that, that if you believe in something and you believe a job is a calling, or you're really passionate about something, don't worry too much about weeks or months or that don't go your way, and you feel others are getting projects and your boss just doesn't like you and you're going nowhere. Most of these things turn as long as you hang in there and keep working hard and keep showing up every day.
Yeah, I guess one piece of advice I have is, especially it can feel tempting, I think, to think you're all alone when things are really hard. I would I would encourage people professionally and otherwise to reach out to your peers and others. I said this in my small group, for help and for support, and to kind of help each other out and to lift each other up, especially networks like this in college and professionally. Some of like the things that I've been able to do that were the greatest or the most successful were as a consequence of others helping me out, or me helping out others who then later, helped me out. And I think that in general, collaborating, working well with others, and genuinely kind of trying to look out for each other is something that's incredibly important and incredibly, valuable. And I think it's something that's really underestimated. Is like, I'm so grateful to all the people, who made it possible for me to be where I am today. And I try to also extend that by helping, and mentoring and guiding others. And I feel like it's tempting to get into like a competitive mindset. But I think in general in life, when two people help each other out, both people win.
And I'm not a panelist, but I would give just a piece of advice too. Just treat college as not your career, but as college. I would say one of the things I would go back and change is I had a little bit of this tunnel vision. Like I did a bunch of finance internships and I spent 3 months in New York doing more finance, and I did economics all 4 years. And it's kind of crazy that I didn't lift my head up at Stanford to at least take a computer science class, or at least kind of go outside of the box a little bit, because I was so career oriented as a freshman. So just don't miss out on opportunities to utilize college, as it's meant for, which is to explore, to learn, to kind of grow. So that's my.
Awesome. Thanks, Devin, and thanks everyone for that advice. And thank all of you, scholars and captains, for joining tonight. You definitely are kind of in the right direction by being here and learning and trying to take in as much information as possible. So thank you all also for joining in tonight. Thank you to our panelists. Jillian, Salil, Nitya, thank you all. Devin, thank you for moderating as well and for spending time with us tonight. That wraps up for tonight. Be on the lookout for our next professional development event, which will be coming up later this year. But also our Leader Summit will be happening next month in the end of June. So if you have not registered for our Leader Summit, be sure to do that as well. More opportunities to connect and learn more from some professionals in our network. So again, thanks everyone for joining tonight, and we'll see you at the next one.
2 cents.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.